Walk on in.
Wow, this is really nice.
Take a look. This is the new reimagined Takeout.
This is really cool. I love the neon. The neon reminds me
It's neo-neon.
I
We'll
like
explain that later.
I like
This is the big family table. So when you come in with lots of my colleagues, other strategists, other reporters, we'll sit here.
Seems like there'll be a lot of conversation to be had right here around the table, as they say.
And eventually we'll get food around this table.
The Takeout.
Living within the Takeout.
Ooh.
And if you go back here,
Can we have Taco Tuesdays?
We very well might. For you, for sure. That's photographs of previous episodes of the Takeout.
Oh, nice. Which baseball stadium is that?
That's Miami Marlins.
Oh, nice.
Talking to Mason Wynn.
Nice.
Have a seat.
Sure.
Chuck, welcome to the first long-form conversation in the reimagined Takeout and our brand new set.
It is absolutely beautiful. Y'all have done wonderful things with it, as they say. I never was an interior designer, but it looks good. Which I am a man's man, so if you put up some neon and it looks like there's a bar over there,
exactly.
I'm in.
That's right. And the whole idea is to make this place feel like we can have a conversation.
Sure. Congratulations, I think you did it.
Tell me about the cowboy hat.
You know, I grew up on a working farm in East Texas, and I've always had a cowboy hat, and I remind my wife, who I just got married to in August, that I've had one since I was a little boy. And when we were home for Christmas last year, my mama broke out old pictures of me in cowboy hats when I was like 4 or 5 years old. So I grew up with Great Depression grandparents who grew up in the Great Depression. So I watched the old Long Ranger black and whites. I watched the Beverly Hillbillies. I watched Bonanza on a working farm. So all of my heroes were cowboys. And then I'm on a farm watching my granddaddy wear a hat. So it just came natural. Then when I lost all my hair, it is sun protection in the summer and heat in the winter.
How many do you have?
Ooh, probably 13 or 14.
Do you have a brand you prefer?
Stetson always, but Stetsons are very expensive. So I have good hats for dress up, then I have hats for travel, and then if it's gonna rain, I got hats I don't care if I mess up.
Since we're climate controlled here and there is no SPF issue, want to take it off?
Yes, absolutely. I like it. My wife makes me wear a black hat. She likes it, and when it's straw, I had to actually go find a straw black hat so that keep her happy.
Tell me about growing up in Tyler, or near Tyler, Texas, because you weren't in Tyler, Texas.
Tyler was 13 miles away, and there was a little farm out where my grandparents lived, and I lived in a trailer home next to my grandmother, where my mother was. Now, my mother was living there because she was only 15 when I was born, so when she moved out, she didn't go far because she had gotten pregnant with an 18-year-old boy who was my daddy. They had met at church, so I lived in this little trailer house next to my grandparents, hence my grandpa, who was like my father. And so growing up there was, I look back on it now and realize how special it was because it was a different time. There was no internet, there was no cell phones. I remind my grandsons now, we had a party line. You'd pick up the phone on the wall and there could be somebody else on the line down the street. So I grew up like my father or my father's brothers, like in a time separated from reality right now because it was just so far removed where you played in the creek like an old Western or you rode on horses. And so it was a different time. And I think that really influenced most of my life.
What did you grow on the farm?
My grandparents grew almost all the vegetables you'd need to eat. So it was a truck farm. So my grandparents would take that produce to the farmer's market 13 miles in the city and sell it to rich folks who wanted fresh vegetables. So it was peas, it was corn, the staples were onions and potatoes, but the onions were the big draw, big yellow sweet onions. In Georgia, they call them vidalias. But in East Texas, we call them noonday sweets, and you could pick them all at the same time, put them on feed sacks, and they'd stay dry, and they'd last for months.
Do you ever remember resenting the rich folks?
I didn't know we weren't rich. I just didn't know any disparities between the two growing up because I thought I had everything I needed. I never went without a meal. My grandmother made sure of that. That's why I weighed 300 pounds when I graduated high school. I never went without a meal ever, and I didn't know we weren't rich. But I look back on it now and remember I always had one good pair of jeans. I had one good pair of shoes, and I had a shirt my mama would not let me wear outside. So I would always have anything I needed, but I didn't know what rich was.
You write that in your book about the Bernie Sanders campaign that your grandfather taught you to hunt, taught you to fish, taught you to use tools, and taught you to put the tools away.
Oh, this sticks with me till today. It may be the greatest lesson any person ever taught me, is that he had this giant tool barn. because he worked with his hands. He only had a third grade education, couldn't read and write, but could build anything. So he had this barn where we'd go and work on things. He would use a welder and cut things and do all the things. But if you went and touched his tools, he knew immediately if they weren't put back. And if you were lazy, it was one of the first lessons he taught me is everything goes back to where you got it, no matter what's going on. And still till today, I'm very disciplined about things. And it's just one of the things that for all the young folks that I talk to when I speak at universities, I'm like, it costs nothing to be organized and be on time. You can be rich and you can be poor and be on time. It also costs nothing to be nice. Be nice to people. Don't be mean. Like, it costs nothing for that. The richest and the poorest among us will open many doors if you show up on time and you're nice, and I usually throw in, and you chew with your mouth closed.
That's a good one to add. That's a very good one to add. What did these accumulated experiences as a child do for you in politics?
It gave me a glimpse into real life. It was much later in my late teens when I would then have a son when I was 19 years old, of me and a teenage father getting full custody of a son and then really kind of experienced some hardships. I had to figure out diapers and daycare, and do I go to a payday lender to get me till payday to buy diapers for a day or two and pay a bunch of interest? Like, these were real life things that slapped me in the face. My grandmother, who worked in a factory making air conditioners, was always there as a little catch-all. If I needed a babysitter, she had just retired. She helped me a lot. These experiences, being a political consultant today, makes me very much in touch with regular folks, because it wasn't my grandfather who worked in the factory, it was me. It wasn't people in my family who had went through having lunch assistance or being on food stamps. It was me. Going to a payday lender and getting my truck repoed one time, that was me. So when I write ads about working people's struggles, it's me who's had them. So my ads just look a little different than somebody who's well-intentioned, who may have went to a really good school and their grandparents sacrificed a lot for them, but they maybe had not have done that.
Is there a language or a heartbeat that you think you bring to politics because of your upbringing that's different?
It is. It starts with growing up very rural and understanding rural working class people. Nobody I was around ever had went to college. I had never went to college. I was very ignorant of worldly things. I couldn't find Germany on a map if it was a test given to me, but I connected with folks whether they were black or white or Latino like me. I didn't really capture my Latinidad or my culture till later in life, because I wasn't raised around many Latinos other than my dad's 14 brothers and sisters. There was not a large Latino community in East Texas, and I was very insulated on that farm. So later in life, I would really yearn to know about my grandparents on the Mexican side of my family. My mother's white. And so I think that's what really makes me different, is I have these cultures that clash, and I write about this in the book of these two grandmothers. My white grandmother, who cooked fried chicken in a cast iron skillet, and my abuela, who would make tortillas every day and hot sauce in a molcajete. Very much different, but very much the same. One comes from Mexico, one's family came from Kentucky, and I'm the conjunction of all of that. And I think that's what really makes me different through my lens of politics.
Talk to me about your job in a factory that helped you provide for your very young son at a very young age.
When I got hired in that factory, I thought I had hit the lottery. I actually
And
had
the factory was?
Kelly Springfield Tire Company, right outside of Tyler, Texas. It had 1,200 men who worked there, and it was 99% men. It had been there since 1965. My father had worked there since the day it had opened, with a lot of other men who'd went to work there. My father and I would become closer after he got me that job there. He divorced my mother when I was just 5. But working in that factory was
Started there in 1990?
Yes, 1990. Great memory. Yes, I went there in 1990, and it was the best job in East Texas because of two things. One is they had a strong union, and the union negotiated strong wages. And I'll never forget when I went to work there, I was making $25 an hour, which I thought was the most money in the world. I had health care, and I had a thing called a defined pension that's very hard to get these days. And so I had all of that. So first thing I did is I went and bought me a new truck. I went and bought me a new boat. I had a credit union that would just take the money out of my checking account. I didn't have to have a loan. They just take the money out. Another lesson in life. You can only buy so many things till when you get done with your paycheck, there's no money left because it's all coming out for the loans. So I learned that lesson the hard way, because no financial planning for a poor kid from East Texas. But working in that factory really made me understand coalition. Because all the guys, mainly again, all guys, black, young, old, had to work in the same department. We had to make things work, and we did dangerous work, loading these giant machines. And being in there with those folks really showed me what it was like to, nobody asked anybody if they were Democrat or Republican. We didn't ask anybody if they were Jewish or Catholic. We just all had to make it work together in very strenuous environment, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
4 shifts.
There would be a shift that was always off and a shift that was always running the plant. And every 24 hours, we made 33,000 tires that would go on passenger cars and trucks. Later, they would shut that plant down, and this is a big part of my political life, and send it to China or to Mexico, because you could make small radial passenger tires overseas and get more of them in a shipping container. So because of NAFTA and preferred trade status with China, I personally experienced watching my family and all of my friends lose their job in a factory that was the best job in East Texas.
What did that tell you about economic decisions and how they're analyzed in Washington and how they're experienced outside of Washington?
It was one of the first times I had seen direct, this is what the government does that can affect your life every single day. I wasn't old enough or new enough to say that somebody has to pass the assistance that me and my family had when we would get some government cheese. I didn't understand the speed limit was government. I didn't understand who paved the road. But I knew when I saw everybody lose their job because the company was so, in my mind, greedy and wanted to send this plant somewhere where they could make things even cheaper. Because we were competing against other U.S. factories. And I remember like it was yesterday, us comparing ourselves to other factories that we had a low safety rating. Not folks didn't get hurt there because we really took care of each other. We produced a lot of tires compared to the other factories, like a bunch of good, hardworking East Texas boys who didn't know no better, so we were just cranking it out every day. And it wasn't good enough. No matter we made a profit.
High volume, high safety, still not good enough.
Still not enough profit. And that's when I started thinking, well, is profit everything? Do these corporations not care about my local community? We've invested here and we've done whatever. Again, politics, profits, public policy. Then it started being like, oh, I see how this all works.
Was that a light bulb kind of moment?
It really was. To think that, and I tell people that when we talk about Donald Trump today and his messaging, when he talks about, I'll be your retribution, the system is rigged, I'll help you, I understand your pain, whether he believes it or not. It's with what a lot of people and a lot of Democrats want to hear because they feel like they've been forgotten about, like a lot of those men who worked with me in that plant in the late 90s.
You rose in the union hierarchy.
I ran for union steward when I hadn't been there but 2 years. I write about this in the book. And I tell young people when I speak to them, it wasn't because I wanted to help my fellow man or I wanted to do something good and for humanity. It's because the guy who recruited me said, now Chuck, I know you don't want to do this job and nobody signed up on your shift because y'all are a bunch of kids on the back shift. I want you to do it. I know your father, he's a good man, even though he's in management now. He had moved his way up. I want you to do this because you are the perfect person for the job. The white people like you, the black people like you, there's very few Latinos, everybody, you get along with everybody. And I said, Sam, I got to load the machine. And he said to me, Chuck, this is the light bulb. He said, if you need to do union work, the union will bring somebody in on overtime to do your job so you can do union work. I was like, sign me up. That sounds like a job I could do.
Take me off the line,
right?
And still pay me.
That's right. And when I tell kids today this, and I'm like, look, it was very self-serving for me. I was not born with wanting to help everybody like you see folks today. I'm like, but me getting into that proved to me then I could do something to be on equal footing with the manager, where I could help protect workers who the manager may not like, or somebody came in a little late and they want to fire him. They had to then go through me as a union steward to try to level the playing field, back to that thing I just said about feeling like lesser than maybe because you weren't a rich person or you weren't part of some big successful thing. Me being the union steward empowered me. And I felt really powerful as that. So that's what really made me feel special about the union, is it leveled the playing field for workers.
Then you got in trouble.
I did.
Tell me about that.
I went to work at the International Union, and I had been there
What's the union?
The steelworkers. The steelworkers had merged with the rubber workers. And I talk about this openly to everybody as well, because it was another life lesson. All through the transition in my life, there's life lessons that if one of those things don't happen, I'm not here today. And I tell young people this all the time. I would move out of the local union, run campaigns, go to work at the International Union, become their political director, and work there for 11 years. And on my way out, there's lots of fighting and like there is in every corporation or union. There was in mine too, and there was a power struggle between me and my number two. And because I had not exactly filled out my expense reforms like I should have, let's say, for instance, you put some gas in your car on the company card in your own truck. You shouldn't do that. I did that. I got in trouble for that, and I had to pay for that with a conviction because they thought, my number two, if they could prove that I was putting gas in my truck, they could fire me and they could get my job as the number two. That wouldn't happen. I would quit.
Was
on
it
my own.
anything worse than gas in your private truck?
It was mileage, $285 worth of mileage and gas is what it was. But I was wrong. And I tell people all the time, you have to admit when you make a mistake. And I thought, because I was the political director of the union, if I put a little gas in my truck, it was okay because I had never taken a day off work in 3 years. But it don't matter if you've taken a day off work, you can't break the law. And I did, and it cost me because I have a criminal conviction now. Even if it's only for a couple $100, it was wrong. And I tell people, if you will be open and honest with folks and admit you did something wrong, look, it's probably, again, one of the best things that ever happened to me because it humbled me. I reset my life. I left the union. I would go and start my own political consulting firm. And I wouldn't be here today if I'd have stayed at the union. I'd have been probably retired now and living on some lake house and having a nice little life, but never get to experience the thing I've seen today.
Chuck, walk me through this thought process you had at the time. You have now a criminal conviction. You say to yourself, now's the perfect time for me to start my own consulting business.
Well, actually, the president of the union came to me.
Knowing that would be a red flag for a lot of potential clients.
Right.
To put it mildly.
To be honest with you, at the time I left, there was no criminal conviction.
Okay.
I'd come to agreement with the steelworkers. I wrote them a check, signed a non-disclosure agreement, and we were very happy with each other. Like, they didn't want any trouble, I didn't want any trouble, and the Department of Labor, who was the one looking at it, was like, okay, if y'all both agree. And then the president of the union's like, well, look, we still want you to be involved. My God, we love you, and we have never had any beef. Go to D.C. and start working with some folks that we already work with, which was the Blue-Green Alliance. So I go to work at the Blue-Green Alliance, which is the Sierra Club and the Steelworkers Conglomerate. I'm doing that work down here. And then I'm like, oh, it's almost like a light bulb went off as well. I'm like, oh, there's consultants that do this work and folks that help other folks, right? And so I do that for 6 months and then decide I should have my own firm and I can work for them and other folks who want to hire me. Other unions had approached me at that time. Keep in mind, there's no conviction, nothing. I'm good with the steelworkers. And so I go to work for CWA, Vote Vets, and a lot of great orgs. But then a Republican appointed prosecutor in in Pittsburgh, several years later would say, oh, it looks like there's some criminal intent here. And they thought it'd be really cool to then come after me. They came after me with trying to get convictions on all this stuff, and it was like low dollar stuff, but it still took years of my life to fight because I'd done nothing wrong, but they thought because I had messed up, they wanted to look at everything, and they looked at everything. I settled with them for a few $100s, wrote a check, never went to jail, but again, life lessons of having to overcome obstacles that I didn't have to go through. And I tell kids this as well when I speak at universities. I'm like, all you have is your network and people who love and trust you. And if they really believe in you, even though you go through what I went through with the criminal conviction now 14 years ago, 20 or 30% of the people I thought were my friends, like you said, didn't want anything to do with me, Major. I work in politics every day. This is a red flag, as you said, for lots of folks, but 70% of my friends circled the wagons and said, look, we all make mistakes. I'm glad you owned up to it. It wasn't nothing major. You never went to jail. You paid a fine and did a little probation. And you learned your lesson. This is what America is about, is second chances. And I tell everybody that I'm so blessed to get a second chance because I've made the most of it. And I think that's why I do so much speaking to young people, is you don't have to be perfect. I never went to college. I have a criminal conviction, and I was a teenage father. Any one of those things should keep me out of politics, and I'm all three of those, and a little mouthy and wear a big old cowboy hat. So you can imagine what I have to deal with candidates who are like, oh, yeah. So everybody knows that, and it really helped me more than it's hurt me.
Are there genuine friends in politics?
I have this conversation with my wife all the time. And I say, she says, you have lots of acquaintances that you think are your friends. And I said, what do you mean? She goes, people that would show up in the middle of the night to help you, how many of those folks are there? And I do have a lot of them. But I think you have to separate emotionally in D.C. of who is an acquaintance and who you could call at midnight that would come get you out of jail. As an old redneck, that's what I would consider a real friend. And
my reference to it is a body bag friend.
There you go. Or my papa was fixing to say, make sure you got 6 because they can put you in the ground because there's 6 pallbearers on a casket. Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So there are a few you would regard as true friends.
Absolutely.
People you come across in politics.
Right, who you grew up with who've always got your back. And in my firm, and I know we'll probably talk about my firm, but when I started this firm, I wanted to create space from what I had learned with my mistakes for young kids of color. There's very few Latino or black kids in politics. So I wanted to create a firm where I could hire them, they could mentor under me, and then they could spread their wings out and go run things, the Democratic Party, congressional races. And in a year, I mean, in 15 years of running this firm, there's 133 young kids who've come through my firm, who's been paid, mentored, and who are part of my Solidarity family now. They pay me back every day. I get so much work and so much help from former staffers who've been with me at some point and given back. It really helps me create my own little network of all of these folks all over the country that really keep me informed.
Did it bother you, tick you off that you had to create a firm with that intent and orientation?
In the beginning, I don't think I had quite the zealous of that I have now, because I was too ignorant to even know what it was really like. I'm like, I'm gonna do all of this, and I'm gonna be a union consultant and help black and brown kids. And then I realized really how hard it was. And then I kind of got a chip on my shoulder, because it wasn't as much the black or brown thing. And that plays a big role in it, but it was more about this hierarchy in the party and power structures of folks that are well educated, whose mother and father have some kind of connection to some power, who get these jobs. So there wasn't an entry point into power or politics for working class kids. It just happens that there's more of them that are black and Latino. So that was really the vision I went in with. And then when I thought about my own story of always feeling lesser than in these powerful rooms, because I didn't go to college and I may not understand all these big words that they're using, I felt a little intimidated. So I knew if I'm this big old boy and I am strong and I'm an alpha and I'm trying to do good things, what would it be like for a 100-pound woman who's 19 years old, who don't know nobody here, and she may be black or Latino, and there's no other black or Latino women who are looking for a way to break in. If they can ever get in, they'll make their own way. There's just not an entry point in politics for any of this.
And you need entry points.
Right. I wanted Chuck Rocha to be the entry point.
I'll get to Bernie in a second, but I wonder if, especially in 2012, after Barack Obama was reelected, there was a kind of conversation that went like this among senior Democrats: demographics or destiny.
There was a lot of conversation about that.
Did you ever believe that?
I did. I'll be honest with you. Because Latinos had voted for the Democratic Party at almost 70% for years, and they were just more Latinos coming of age every day. Black folks voted for Democrats at 90%, and they were the bedrock, and Barack Obama had just got elected. So that it went from 90 to 99 and 98%. And I never thought in a million years I would be in the position I'm in today, because before Barack Obama, I'd worked for Dick Gephardt and John Edwards in their presidential campaigns. This was the working class party. And we had just taken the working class party and then melded it with a well-educated, awesome black guy from Chicago who was the most articulate person I'd ever seen on the stump. So I'm like, we've hit nirvana. Now, I would not understand the inner workings of the government or his administration to, while he was in office, us losing 1,000 state house seats as Democrats in that 8 years, because I loved to see the shining hill and all the things that he was doing. I was super proud of us as a country to elect a black man. Underneath it, I didn't see none of the work that wasn't going on at the state level, or how my party was drifting away from the reason I joined it, which was to fight trade deals, to give voice to the voiceless, and to fight for folks who may not have a college degree or a lot of money.
I'm sure you've imagined this more than once, but help me understand how you imagine it. Bernie Sanders is the nominee of the Democratic Party in 2016 and not Hillary Clinton.
I think that we go back and we don't slide from the working class. We may go too far focused on the working class, which I think would be hard to do. But Bernie, people ask me all the time, is Bernie really like Bernie is on TV? And I'm like, Bernie's the only politician I've ever worked for where there's no filter. Like, he is who he is behind the scenes, just like he is in front of the scenes.
But would Democrats have won in 2016?
That's a question I don't know. I would have never said Donald Trump would have ever had a chance to win. That's why I think Bernie could win. Because I think there was a lot of working class white Republicans who felt voiceless, who liked Bernie Sanders. And I think that's why he gets elected. Because those same people that I didn't think would show up as a professional for Donald Trump, lesson one for people out there is, if you don't have a voting history and you didn't go to college, you're normally not a voter. And we're not going to do anything to get you to vote because you have a history of not voting. Donald Trump got some of those folks to actually show up. Well, I think Bernie Sanders would have too.
What does the party need to do now and to say that it didn't say in 2024?
We need to root our message in something that's the core of who we are. You know, with a Republican, they've got a couple core things: immigration, taxes, whatever their thing is. They talk about that all, they have forever.
Strength.
Right, all those things. Democrats should root ours in work. Work is the thing that brings people together. Whether you put on a suit, whether you put on a pair of work gloves, whether you put on a cooking apron, Everybody has to work to protect and provide for their family. We've forgotten how to talk about that as Democrats. That used to be all we talked about. If we want to get back, if winning back some of the folks that we've lost, re-energize Latino and Black voters, we talk about working, protecting work, wages, health care, babysitting, all the things that go around that nucleus of work and family. That's the only thing really people care about. When Donald Trump or Republicans talk about immigration, it's to distract you from something else like we were using as Democrats, which was abortion. So it was the abortion versus the immigration, and none of that has to do with economic freedoms or economic anything. The inflation was going high, and we could use that, but in the last election cycle, just to look at one example, that's where the most money was spent on those two issues, which was immigration by Republicans, abortion by Democrats.
Does there need to be a reckoning for those who were silent in the last 2 years of the Biden presidency about whether it was proper for him, for the party, to have him seek another term?
Everybody who runs our campaigns in the Democratic Party are part of three trees. Trees, think of it as your family lineage of either the Clinton tree, the Obama tree, and now the Biden tree. The thing is that through most of all of those trees in that little forest are the same people who have been involved for a long time. That's the people who I think over time, who are well-intentioned and brilliant consultants, it's time for them to go. It's time for a new day in the Democratic Party to have new blood. Remember we talked about having an entry point for working class kids? That now has not happened for 20 years. Now we should open up the processes at the state party level, at the national party level to say, look, what they did was wrong. We need new voices and new ideas because we've done the same thing over many, many years, hoping for different results, and it hasn't happened. So I think the reckoning needs to be with that consultant class more so than anybody else.
Chuck Rocha, thanks.
Thank you for having me.